Well, it's a bit of a gloomy day today, so today's topic is on a department who is quite literally responsible for putting a roof over our heads. Welcome to In the Loop. Hello folks and welcome to Ropley, where you can see there's a lot going on behind me. So without further ado, it's time to do the news. Well, starting off with Lion. Now last week we had a look inside about the work that needs to be done, and a big step forward has been taken. As you can see behind me, the engine and generator have been lifted out. They're currently being split off. The engine will eventually end up on this wagon here, and the generator is going to be sent off to Derby for the works. A huge achievement, not just for the Watercress line. This is the biggest lift we've undertaken, 29 tonnes, but also working with our friends at the 50 Alliance at the Severn Valley Railway to undertake this work. A real achievement, and if you'd like to keep posted with more updates about what's going on, don't forget to follow Lion's very own Facebook page, and we'll chuck a link in the description below. While we're here, an interesting note about the beam, this actually came from Lara Depot, where Lion was based, so the chances are this very beam would have put this engine block in the first place. Little bits of history for you. Now looking at our little tank engine, which is currently under overhaul here, well, work is progressing incredibly well. If you have a look at the back here, we have a brand new coal bunker, used for carrying the coal. And on the inside, lots of the motion has already been stripped out, ready for this cylinder block to be taken out and a brand new one to be put in, so providing a new source of oomph for the engine. Here underneath Canadian Pacific's tender, the guys in Ropley are currently carrying on with the plumbing out and fitting side. So next to me we have the brake rigging. On the outside they're fitting out the vacuum pipes and the steam heat pipes. Now the steam heating, essentially you take live steam from the locomotive and pipe it through the trains. Arguably a very useful feature in the winter. And if you ever see steam coming out of the coaches kind of towards the rear of the train, that'll be the steam heat system. Other line of tenders, looking at the Stoner 475079s, well, all 414 rivets have now been fitted to the frames. A fantastic achievement, and this really is taking shape, and hopefully won't be too long before we can start mounting the tender tank to it. While all the riveting has been done on the tender, well, the main chassis, there's still a little bit more to do. Last time we saw the drag box ready to put in, well, it's in and ready to go. Well, I say ready, there's a bit more reaming and tapping to do with some of the holes, and then that will be riveted in. 506 is currently stopped for an annual exam, so they've taken the opportunity to bring it into the paint shop to do a little bit of work on the boiler, seizing the opportunity. Now for those of you guys who did come to the gala, then you'll know that our 7F unfortunately failed on the Saturday after the first trip with a blown superheater element. But the guys at Ropley did a fantastic job repairing it, and as you can see it's back out and running again in a relatively quick turnaround. Now over to the boiler shop where our little tank engine's boiler is in. The tubes are out. The white lines you can see are part of a non-destructive testing to see what the state of the boiler is. That's where all the white lines you can see inspecting the historical welds, and all the little dots you can see about, that's part of the ultrasound element of the non-destructive testing to detect plate thickness. Now looking at Canadian Pacific, Jamie has been doing a fantastic job with the ashpan. Again, it's upside down. He's now been working on the damper doors here, so hopefully these open doors to allow more what we call primary air in from underneath the fire bed. Now, since we're in the boiler shop, it would be rude not to take a quick look at the boiler itself. Now looking at the boiler itself, well, staying wise, about 75% down. Now most of the time we've been talking about these, just normal stays, different diameters, for whatever you need. But we're currently fitting what we call flexible stays, which look a bit more like these. Essentially, they sit in a sheath which is welded to the outside of the boiler. You put an annealed copper ring in on top, some heat-proof grease, and then seal the top. Now these are for the thermic siphons to allow a bit more expansion. I'll tell you what, let's hop up in the boiler and I'll show you what we mean. Now these beasties here, these are the thermic siphons. Essentially they're put into Bully Pacifics to increase the circulation of the water. So there's water between these two plates, obviously stays holding that distance apart. The idea is the fire heats the water up and gets it circulating through the boiler, increasing the steam generation rate. Now, as with everything metal, there's expansion to take care of. Now the main expansion in the boiler is dealt with by fixing the front of the smoke box and the rear sliding along and sliding back only by a couple of inches. But these have their own expansion kind of coping mechanisms, which are these here. These are called diaphragms, essentially bits of plate, and they will flex ever so slightly to compensate for that. Now, the problem with that, if you were to put rigid stays in, well, you'd either crack the stays or you'd crack the plate work, which is why we have these, the flexible stays. So let's quickly pop on the outside and I'll show you how they fit in. So here we are on the outside. You can see the cups are welded onto the throat plate of the boiler. They're currently drilling, reaming and tapping, so the threads of the stays actually go through. You can see there's one that's already actually been screwed in at the moment, so it's got a little bit more to go. Then they'll have the annealed copper washer, like this one, put on top of it, filled up with that heat-proof grease and screwed in. So you allow a little bit of movement of those thermic siphons, or the diaphragm specifically. Now you may be wondering how they actually, well, pull the thread through, because obviously you can't do much screwing with this at one point. And that's where this tool comes into it. Essentially you screw it in to the stay itself, and then you can actually screw it around using a spanner. Once this is through, it will then be tooled over on the inside to make that water and steam tight seal. Now regarding the tubes themselves, they are here. Essentially they've been annealed at the end to make them a bit more malleable for when they actually get fitted, so you can tool them over and make a nice steam tight seal. Essentially the process is you'll heat it up with a blowtorch until they're nice and cherry red. They'll start to glow, and then once they've cooled down, then you clean off the whole ends with a flap wheel, which is what they're doing at the moment. And finally, if any of you guys visited us last weekend, you may have seen something special with our 7F, namely a giraffe. But that wasn't any giraffe, that was Jeffrey. Jeffrey has been on an adventure to raise money for Great Ormond Street Hospital after his owner Louise sadly died a few years ago, just at the age of 9. He's been far and wide, travelling in fighter jets to the edge of space itself, but he was yet to ride on a steam locomotive. So we changed that, joining Richard, our ops manager, on a run on the 7F. Jeffrey saw the sights of Hampshire. Now Jeffrey's journey can be followed, and I'll put a link in the description below, and credit to them, Ian and Amanda Conway, who set up Jeffrey's adventure and fund to raise money for Great Ormond Street Hospital. Well, this year they won ITV's Pride of Britain Awards in September. Nothing short of amazing. Nothing like a heartwarming story to end the news with. Now, while we're here, I'd like to introduce you to Punk. And he's here for a very special reason. You see, this week is our Wizard Week. Lots of spooky goings on around here at Rockley and down at Alsford as well. So, if you are around this weekend, these guys will be here and you get to meet some wonderful creatures. Anyway, on with today's story, which takes us to a slightly sunnier Medstead & Foremarks. Now for today's topic of the film, we're here at Medstead & Foremarks to meet one of the most important departments on the railway. So, without further ado, let's dive in and chat to the buildings team. Mark, John, thank you so much for joining us and showing us around. So, you guys are part of the building department. What are the building department sort of responsible for? Is it everything we see? Or?
Very nearly, yes. We're responsible for the stations, repairing, building, signal boxes. We've moved 3 of those in from various places around the south of England. 3 footbridges we put up. They've come from various places in the south of England. But we've always had to be very conscious of the fact we've got to pick something that won't look out of place on a southern station.
You always have to look at what we started with. A lot of the doors and windows were made during London South Western days, pre-1923. So some of the things we have to look into to make sure that the detail goes right back to London South Western. Recently we made 3 pairs of doors down at Alsford. 2 pairs of doors were London South Western. So we had to go as near as possible to London South Western, and the 3rd pair was Edwardian. So that's the sort of thing we have to look into.
So is it a case that it's normally easier to make it kind of from scratch, working to a design rather than trying to restore, or is it kind of a bit of both?
We have got drawings within the railway, first going right back to the Victorian times, but usually it's just have a look what we've already got, trying to get as near as possible for what we've already got. That's what we try to do with the doors down at Alsford.
Right outside the building department workshop, we have the loading dock here. So you guys sort of built this from scratch almost, didn't you?
Yes, originally there was a loading dock here because we discovered bits of it when we were doing this one, but it had all been swept away in the closer business. Just down there, near where you're sitting, Will, there was another crane. We found bits of it. It was a wooden-faced one, filled with all sorts of things. But we built this in spare time, shall I say. Slowly over the years, we built this wall and that wall, then filled it all in, and then cobbled it. These cobbles came from King's Cross, but we were always very conscious that there should be a crane on it. So we got this one. It was given to us by the Basingstoke Canal people because they had it on the side of the Basingstoke Canal. They'd never used it, so we said, would you like it? I think it had rolled into the canal on one occasion, so it was a bit corroded.
Mere technicalities, yeah.
So we brought it back here, we did a design for the base and put it up. We designed the base as it would have been designed in its heyday.
It does look wonderful, especially when on charters and events they have a couple of wagons in here. It does really recreate the scene and it looks superb. Well, with that in mind, shall we head a bit further down the line?
Yes.
Fantastic. So guys, we're now at Lopley under the platform waiting shelter, and although this does look like it has always been here, that wasn't the case, was it, John?
No, it wasn't. It was built in 2014. It started in the autumn of 2013. We had to employ a contractor to do the groundworks because we didn't have the skills to drive dumpers and diggers to open up the site. In actual fact, there's 70 cubic metres of chalk to dig out on this site. That bulks up 100%, so there was a fair bit of spoil to get rid of. So we had a contractor do the groundworks, and they finished, and we took over the site in February of 2014. And everything that you see in this building was produced and constructed in our workshops and in the yard at Medstead Station, and it was transported when made by rail down to site. The columns that you see are wrought iron columns. They were originally at Ringwood Station, and we had lucky enough to have 11 of them, and which 4 of them are being used here. The actual, everything that you see, including the trusses, the main trusses, all the roof frame was made in the Meccano set of parts at Medstead Yard and workshops. With myself being a carpenter and joiner of long standing, roof frame being my forte when I was a young man, I set out all the truss work, all the timber work, and showed the non-trade volunteers how to put things together. And it was designed as the Victorians do it, and as you can see, it's way over-designed as the Victorians did things. And what you see is a copy of what they did in Victorian times.
I say, it does look absolutely wonderful. Mark, I'm right in thinking that's, what was it, a chap from the NRM came down, he didn't believe it was actually a new build.
That's right. Colin Chambers is showing a chap from the NRM around, and they came onto the platform there and they said, those chaps, or they were all working at the time, those chaps over there make a good job restoring that building, aren't they? And Colin had to disabuse him of that and inform him it was a new build.
I say, because it's a true credit to you, it's kind of making your marks in, it's 2007 you were saying you started, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 2007. You know, I'm a fairly new boy, although we're now in 2022. I'm a new boy compared to Mark, who's been here right from the start. And be quite honest with you, what Mark achieved right from the start with the bridges, the signal boxes, the water cranes, platform extensions, what he did with the volunteers was absolutely out of this world. How on earth he achieved that? And when I came along, and Mark asked me to be project manager on this, I don't think I could ever get anywhere near the standards of what Mark achieved. Okay, I've achieved some, but nowhere near. And this man here, really, yeah, this man here really is, you know, he got the essence of what the railway was all about and how things should be done. And I like to think that he was an inspiration for me to do what I've been able to do. And I can honestly say this, what you see here is the pinnacle of my career. And I've done some prestige jobs in my time, other than the railway, but this was the pinnacle of my career.
So there we are, guys, the buildings department, a crucial team of volunteers who are literally responsible for putting roofs over our head. I mean, on a personal note, after chatting with John, he is such an interesting bloke. The amount of stuff he's been involved in at the Watercress Line really cannot be understated. And that's the same for a lot of people as well. When we were chatting to John, he interestingly bought out one of his wood planers, got from a company that went bust in the 1800s. Amazing. But that's it from us this time, folks. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Mark and John for talking to us. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And since Cheltenham will be leaving us very shortly, I think it's only fitting if we end with a little homage or compilation.